Somewhere in the dark emptiness between stars, far beyond anything human eyes had ever seen, a civilization older than most planets held its breath. The Velthari Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had crushed 90 species under their boots. They had burned worlds, drained oceans, and turned entire civilizations into footnotes in their history books. And now, Supreme Overlord Draven Tal stood on the balcony of his palace, looking out at the largest war fleet his empire had ever assembled for a single target. 12,000 warships. Each one was the size of a small city, covered in dark armor that absorbed light like a hungry mouth. They filled the sky above the Velthari homeworld in perfect rows, blocking out the stars. The people below watched with tears in their eyes. Children pointed. Old soldiers saluted. Poets had already written songs about the victory that was sure to come. Draven Tal was 8 feet tall. His body was wrapped in living armor, a second skin made of chitin that grew from his bones and covered him like black glass. His eyes burned a deep gold, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the entire capital city, through speakers built into every wall, every street, every home. Today, he said, we bring order to another corner of the galaxy, a small blue world filled with soft creatures who have barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. They call themselves humans. They will call themselves nothing soon enough. The crowd roared. Flags waved. Somewhere in the back, a group of young Velthari soldiers chanted war songs that their grandfathers had taught them. Commander Euless stood behind Draven Tal, her hands clasped behind her back. She was tall, even for a Velthari, with sharp features and cold, careful eyes. She had led more invasions than she could count. She had broken the spines of species that thought themselves brave. She had never lost. She bowed her head when Draven Tal turned to her. "Commander," he said, "bring me their world." "It will be done, Supreme Overlord," she replied. And she meant it. She had reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity. Level 2 pre-ascendant species. That meant they had basic space travel, crude energy systems, and no meaningful military presence beyond their own planet. The Velthari had conquered level 4 species without breaking a sweat. This was going to be simple, routine, boring even. The fleet departed that evening. 12,000 ships folded space and vanished into the dark, leaving behind a homeworld drunk on pride and absolutely certain of victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. On the other side of the galaxy, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Sejong City, South Korea, a man named Ha-Jun was eating kimbap at his desk. Ha-Jun was 34 years old. He had messy hair, tired eyes, and a coffee stain on his shirt that he had stopped caring about around lunchtime. He worked at the Global Automated Defense Network, which everyone just called GADN. It was the organization responsible for monitoring near-Earth space, asteroids, solar flares, orbital debris, and anything else that might ruin someone's day. It was not a glamorous job. Most of the time, Ha-Jun stared at screens full of data that meant nothing was happening. He filed reports. He attended meetings. He drank too much coffee and not enough water. He had once described his job to a friend as watching paint dry in space. But today, something blinked on his screen. It was a deep space sensor alert. The GADN had a network of long-range detection systems scattered across the solar system. Satellites, probes, relay stations, all designed to spot anything unusual coming toward Earth. Most of the time, they spotted rocks. Sometimes, they spotted comets. Once, they spotted a lost research probe from the 2090s that everyone had forgotten about. Today, they spotted 12,000 alien warships. Ha-Jun stopped chewing. He looked at the screen. He blinked. He looked again. The data was clear. A massive formation of unknown objects had just entered the far edge of the solar system, moving at speeds that no asteroid could match. Their energy signatures were unlike anything in the database. The computer had automatically flagged them as artificial, intelligent, intentional. Ha-Jun swallowed his kimbap and leaned back in his chair. "Huh," he said. He ran the standard protocol. He verified the data with 3 separate sensor arrays. He cross-referenced the energy signatures with known human spacecraft and found no match. He checked for system errors, glitches, false positives. Everything came back clean. This was real. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, and filed a Tier 3 notification. Tier 3 was reserved for large asteroids, significant solar events, and other things that were worth keeping an eye on, but not worth panicking about. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of saying, "Hey, just so you know." His colleague Sua walked over a few minutes later, holding her own cup of coffee. She was 29, sharp as a knife, and worked in cybersecurity. She had a habit of reading over Ha-Jun's shoulder, which annoyed him, but he had given up fighting it years ago. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at his screen. "Alien fleet," Ha-Jun said, like he was telling her about a weather forecast. Sua leaned in and looked at the data. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning the numbers, the formations, the projected trajectory. She straightened up. 12,000? She said. "That's it?" Ha-Jun shrugged. "That's what the sensors say." "Okay. Did you file the report?" "Already done." "Cool." She walked back to her desk. And that was it. No sirens, no emergency broadcasts, no presidents standing behind podiums with grave expressions, no generals shouting orders in underground bunkers. The Gadden's automated orbital defense grid, a vast network of weapons platforms that circled the Earth and filled the space between the planets, received the data and began quietly adjusting. Satellites shifted, platforms recharged, targeting systems updated. It was all automatic. Humanity had built its defenses the same way it had built its roads and power grids, slowly, carefully, and so thoroughly that most people forgot they were even there. Somewhere out in the cold dark of space, 12,000 Velthari warships were flying toward Earth with the absolute certainty that they were about to conquer a helpless, primitive world. And on Earth, Ha-Jun finished his kimbap, refilled his coffee, and went back to watching paint dry in space. 3 weeks passed. The Velthari fleet crossed the outer edges of the solar system and entered what they considered striking distance. Commander Euless stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Fang, and watched the small blue dot on her display screen grow slightly larger with each passing hour. Earth, the target, the prize. She had spent the journey reviewing every piece of intelligence the Dominion had gathered on humanity. Their radio signals, which the Velthari had intercepted decades ago, painted a picture of a noisy, chaotic, emotional species. They argued with each other constantly. They made art about imaginary things. They spent enormous amounts of energy on entertainment. To Euless, they seemed like children, loud and soft, and completely unprepared for what was coming. She gave the order to broadcast the surrender demand. The message was transmitted on every frequency the Velthari could reach. It was delivered in the Dominion's standard conquest format, a format that had been used on 90 species before, and 90 species had either surrendered or died. The words were simple and absolute. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Velthari Dominion. Surrender your world, your resources, and your population to the eternal glory of our empire, or face total annihilation. You have 1 planetary rotation to comply. There will be no second warning. Euless clasped her hands behind her back and waited. She expected panic. She expected desperate pleas. She expected hurried transmissions from terrified leaders begging for mercy. That was how it always went. Some species cried, some prayed, some tried to fight, and were crushed within hours. but they all responded with fear. Every single one. The first human to hear the message was a 26-year-old communications officer named Yuna, stationed aboard a UESC relay platform orbiting Mars. She was cheerful by nature, a little nosy, and currently in the middle of eating a cup of instant noodles when the alien broadcast lit up her console. She set down her chopsticks and played the message. The translation software took about 40 seconds to decode it. She read the text on her screen, tilted her head to one side, and read it again. Then she forwarded it to Admiral Tejo with a short note attached. "Sir, incoming message from the alien fleet. They sound serious. Kind of cute, though." Admiral Tejo was 40 years old, stationed at the UESC command hub in Mars orbit, and currently in the middle of a chess game on his tablet. He was a calm man. Some would say too calm. He had the kind of face that never seemed worried about anything, which was either reassuring or deeply unsettling, depending on who was looking at it. He read the Velthari surrender demand. He read Yuna's note. He smiled slightly. The way a man smiles when a small dog barks at him from across the street. He typed a single-line reply and sent it through the official diplomatic channel. "Noted. Please hold." Then he went back to his chess game. The message reached Commander Eulis 17 minutes later. She stared at it for a long time. She read it 3 times. She had her communications officer verify the translation. It was correct. "Noted. Please hold." That was it. No fear. No anger. No surrender. No defiance. Just 2 words and a polite request to wait. Eulis felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She did not have a word for it yet. Later she would realize it was the first seed of doubt. She pushed it aside and decided on a show of force. When a species did not respond properly to the surrender demand, the Velthari would destroy something visible and dramatic. A moon, an outpost, a space station, to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. Eulis chose one of Jupiter's smaller moons. It was uninhabited, rocky, and the perfect size for a demonstration. She ordered the fleet's forward batteries to open fire. The moon broke apart in a spectacular explosion. Chunks of rock, the size of mountains, tumbled into Jupiter's gravity well. The Velthari recorded the entire event from multiple angles and broadcast the footage toward Earth on every available channel. Eulis allowed herself a small, satisfied nod. Now, they would understand. Earth received the footage. It was picked up by civilian communication networks within an hour. News stations played it on loop for a little while. Social media reacted the way social media always reacted to things. The hashtag aliens threw a rock trended for about 6 hours. A famous online streamer did a live reaction video that got 12 million views. Someone made a remix of the explosion set to music. A comedy account posted a picture of the shattered moon with the caption, "Me after Monday." A retired professor went on a talk show and calmly explained that the destroyed moon had been scientifically uninteresting anyway. By the next morning, the news cycle had moved on. A famous actor had been caught in a scandal, and that was far more interesting to most people than an alien fleet blowing up a rock near Jupiter. Eulis monitored the human broadcasts carefully. She had expected fear. She had expected governments declaring states of emergency. She had expected military mobilizations, desperate alliances, frantic communications between world leaders. Instead, she watched humans make jokes. She watched them turn the destruction of a celestial body into entertainment. She watched them get bored of it and move on within a single day. She sat alone on the bridge of the Eternal Fang for a long time that night, staring at the blue dot on her screen. Back on Earth, a retired marine biologist named Ji-Wan sat in his small apartment in Busan, watching the alien footage on his laptop. He was 62 years old, soft-spoken, and had recently been called back as a civilian advisor to the UESC's Xenobiology Division. He was not interested in the war. He was interested in the aliens themselves. He paused the footage on a frame that showed a Velthari ship in detail. He zoomed in on the hull, studying the patterns, the textures, the way the armor seemed to shift slightly, even in still images. Living material, he muttered to himself, making notes on a pad of paper. Some kind of organic metallic composite. Fascinating. He picked up his phone and called the xenobiology department. Yes, hello, this is G1. When this is all over, I would like a sample of their ship hull. Just a small piece, for research. He paused, listening. Yes, I can wait. Thank you. He hung up and went back to studying the footage, completely unbothered by the fact that 12,000 alien warships were heading toward his planet. Commander Euless sent her report to Supreme Overlord Draven Tal that night. She chose her words carefully, but she could not hide the confusion in them. The humans are not afraid, she wrote. They received our ultimatum and responded with a request to wait. They watched us destroy a moon and made jokes about it. Their military has not mobilized in any visible way. Their population continues with normal activity. I do not understand this behavior. It does not match any known pattern of any conquered species in our records. She hesitated before adding the final line. Something about this feels wrong. Draven Tal read the report in his throne room, surrounded by advisors and generals. He dismissed Euless's concerns with a wave of his armored hand. They are primitives, he said. They do not understand what is coming. Their ignorance is not strength. It is the calm of an animal too stupid to recognize a predator. His advisors nodded. His generals agreed. The invasion would proceed as planned. But deep in the cold space between Mars and Jupiter, 12,000 Velthari warships flew onward toward a world that had seen them coming, measured them, categorized them, and gone back to sleep. And not a single human had lost a minute of rest over it. The Velthari fleet crossed the orbit of Mars on a cold, quiet morning. 10,000 ships moved in perfect formation, a massive crescent shape that had been used by Velthari commanders for centuries. It was called the Jaw of God, and it was designed to surround a planet from all sides, cutting off escape and crushing resistance like a fist closing around a throat. It had worked on every world the Dominion had ever attacked, every single one. Commander Euless stood on the bridge of the Eternal Fang, watching the tactical display. Earth was now clearly visible on the main screen, a bright blue marble, hanging in the black. She could see the continents, the swirling clouds, the thin glow of city lights on the dark side. It looked fragile. It looked small. She had left 2,000 ships in reserve near Jupiter, standard protocol for any invasion. The remaining 10,000 pushed forward in the jaw formation, spreading out across millions of kilometers of space. Each ship knew its position. Each captain knew the plan. This was the part where civilizations broke. All ships report ready, her second officer announced. Euless nodded. Begin the approach. Standard engagement speed. The fleet accelerated. And then something strange happened. The space ahead of them, which had been empty and dark just moments before, began to light up. Not with stars, not with explosions, but with small, sharp points of light. Thousands of them, then tens of thousands, appearing in a spreading pattern, like fireflies, waking up in a field at dusk. Euless leaned forward. What is that? Her sensor officer worked frantically at his console. The readings were confusing. The objects were small, much smaller than any warship. Each one was roughly the size of a Velthari shuttle. But there were so many of them. The numbers climbed on the display. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. 40,000 objects detected, the sensor officer said, his voice unsteady. They appear to be weapons platforms. Automated. No life signs. Euless stared at the display. 40,000 platforms, arranged in a vast web that stretched across the entire inner solar system, like a net made of light. Each platform was small, fast, and positioned with mathematical precision. Together, they formed a structure so large and so perfectly organized that it almost looked alive. This was the lattice. On Earth, in a quiet control room deep beneath Sejong City, a 38-year-old engineer named Dong-hyun sat at his console and watched the same data from the other side. He was a calm man. He kept a small cactus on his desk in a clay pot. He had named the cactus General because it sat on his desk through every shift, every alert, and every boring Tuesday without ever complaining. Dong-hyun had maintained the lattice for 9 years. He knew every platform, every relay, every power node. The lattice had been built 60 years ago, originally designed to protect Earth from asteroids and comets. It was a simple idea. Instead of building a few big weapons, build thousands of small ones and spread them everywhere. Each platform carried kinetic impactors that could accelerate small metal rods to a significant fraction of the speed of light, and directed energy systems powerful enough to vaporize a house-sized rock from 1,000 kilometers away. Over the decades, the lattice had been upgraded, expanded, and improved. New platforms were added. Old ones were replaced. The targeting systems got smarter. The power systems got stronger. What had started as an asteroid defense network had quietly become the most powerful automated weapon system ever created by any species in the galaxy. And almost nobody on Earth thought about it. Dong-hyun looked at his screen. The Velthari fleet was entering the lattice's engagement range. He glanced at his cactus. "All right, General," he said quietly. "Let's clean this up." He pressed a single key on his console. The lattice woke up. 40,000 platforms activated simultaneously. Their fusion reactors hummed to full power. Their targeting systems locked on to the Velthari fleet in less than 2 seconds. Their weapons charged. And then they fired. The first wave of kinetic impactors, small metal rods no bigger than a human finger, left their launchers at nearly a third of the speed of light. At that velocity, each rod carried more energy than a nuclear bomb. They crossed the distance to the Velthari fleet in moments. The first Velthari capital ship was hit by 17 rods in the space of half a second. Each rod punched through the ship's armor like a needle through wet paper, entering on one side and exiting on the other, leaving tunnels of superheated plasma in their wake. The ship did not explode dramatically. It simply broke. Its spine snapped, its power core ruptured, it split into 3 pieces and went dark. Then the next ship was hit, and the next, and the next. The directed energy beams came a moment later, invisible lances of focused energy that had been designed to deflect comets. They sliced through Velthari escort frigates like hot wire through ice, cutting ships in half with surgical precision. Commander Eulis screamed orders from the bridge of the Eternal Fang. "Evasive patterns. Return fire. Target the platforms." But the Velthari had never fought an enemy like this. Every war they had ever won was against crewed ships. Ships that had captains who could panic, crews that could tire, formations that could break under pressure. The lattice had no crew. It had no fear. It had no hesitation. Each platform moved independently, dodging return fire with sharp, sudden movements, while continuing to shoot with perfect accuracy. And they coordinated, not like soldiers following orders, but like a single mind with 40,000 hands. The Velthari fired back with everything they had. Their weapons were powerful. They destroyed platforms, hundreds of them in the first few minutes. But for every platform they killed, 3 more adjusted their positions to fill the gap. The web healed itself faster than the Velthari could tear it apart. In the Gadien control room, a 31-year-old physicist named Mireille sat beside Dong-hyun, monitoring the lattice's performance in real time. She was an enthusiastic woman who spoke mostly in technical language, and had once accidentally set a satellite on fire during a routine calibration test. She said it taught her more than any textbook. Lattice is operating at 73% capacity, she reported, tapping her screen. We haven't even activated the deep-range platforms yet. Donghyun nodded. We probably won't need to. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 47 minutes. In those 47 minutes, 4,200 Valthari ships were destroyed. They died in silence, in the vacuum of space, torn apart by weapons that had been built to protect Earth from rocks. The Lattice lost 600 platforms. It was already manufacturing replacements. Commander Euless, her flagship damaged and her fleet broken, gave the order to retreat. The surviving ships turned and fled beyond Mars, limping and burning, leaving behind a field of wreckage so vast it would take years to fully map. Euless stood on her damaged bridge, surrounded by sparking consoles and the smell of burning circuits. She looked at the tactical display. The Lattice was still there, still glowing, still watching. It had barely moved. It had barely tried. She said nothing for a long time. On Earth, the engagement made the evening news. It was the third story, after a political debate about taxes and a viral video of a dog riding a skateboard. A news anchor described it as a brief confrontation with the alien fleet, and moved on to the weather forecast. Donghyun logged the event, filed his report, and finished his shift. He watered General before leaving. The cactus looked the same as always. Mireille sent a department-wide email that evening. The subject line read, Lattice performed at 73% capacity. Recommend firmware update before next engagement. Nobody responded to the email for 2 days. And when someone finally did, it was to ask if the office coffee machine had been fixed. Ha-jun, back at Gadden headquarters, updated the Tier 3 notification file to Tier 2. Not because the situation was dangerous. The Lattice had handled it easily. But because the paperwork required a category upgrade after any kinetic engagement. Rules were rules. Sua saw the update and raised an eyebrow. Tier 2? Feeling dramatic today? Ha-jun shrugged. Protocol. And somewhere beyond Mars, in the wreckage of what had been the most powerful invasion fleet the Valthari had ever sent against a single world, Commander Euless sat in her darkened quarters and began writing a message she never thought she would write. It was addressed to Supreme Overlord Draven Tal. It said, We need more ships. Many more. And even then, I am not certain it will be enough. When Commander Euless's report reached the Valthari homeworld, the Empire went silent. Not the silence of peace, the silence of shock. For 12,000 years, the Dominion had never lost a battle so completely, so quickly, or so quietly. 4,200 ships, gone. Not to a rival empire, not to a powerful federation of allied species, to a web of small machines orbiting a single unremarkable star system. Supreme Overlord Draven Tal read the report alone in his throne room. He read it once, then again, then a third time. Each time, the words made him angrier. Euless described the weapons. She described their speed, their precision, their ability to repair themselves. She described how the humans had not even sent a single crewed ship to fight. She described how Earth's population had gone about its normal business during the entire engagement. She described the memes. Draven Tal crushed the data tablet in his hand. The living armor on his body rippled with rage, turning a shade of deep red that his advisors knew meant danger. Bring me every ship in the Dominion, he said. His advisors looked at each other. Every ship was not a small request. The Valthari Dominion stretched across 4,000 star systems. Its navy was scattered across hundreds of sectors, guarding borders, occupying conquered worlds, patrolling trade routes. Pulling them all together would leave entire regions undefended. Vassal species, the 90 civilizations that lived under Valthari rule, might see the opportunity and rebel. One advisor, braver than the rest, said as much. Draven Tal looked at him with golden eyes full of fire. If we cannot crush one small blue world, we deserve to lose everything else. Bring me every ship, every soldier, every weapon. I will burn that planet myself. The full mobilization of the Velthari Dominion took 2 months. It was the largest military gathering in the recorded history of the galaxy. 200,000 warships were pulled from every corner of the Empire and assembled into a single, massive fleet. Vassal species were forced to contribute their own ships. War factories that had been idle for centuries were restarted. Weapons that had been kept in storage since the last great galactic war were dusted off and loaded onto transport carriers. Draven Tal stood before a galaxy-wide broadcast and made his declaration. His voice reached 4,000 worlds. The humans have insulted the Dominion. They have drawn Velthari blood. This will not stand. I swear on the blood of my ancestors, Earth will burn. Humanity will be erased from existence. Their machines will be melted to slag. Their cities will be dust. Their name will be forgotten. Across the Empire, billions of Velthari watched and cheered. This was the Empire they believed in. This was the power they had always been promised. 200,000 ships. No species could survive that. No species ever had. The fleet departed in waves, folding space toward the Sol system. The journey would take 4 months. On Earth, they knew it was coming. The UESC had deep space sensors that tracked the Velthari mobilization in real time. Intelligence analysts watched the fleet assemble. They counted every ship. They measured every energy signature. They mapped every formation. General Sung Ho received the final intelligence report on a Tuesday morning. He was 50 years old, lean, with gray at his temples, and a face that rarely showed emotion. He had served in the military for 30 years, though he had never fought an actual war. Humanity had not needed to fight one in a long time. Its defenses did the fighting for it. He reviewed the report while sipping green tea. 200,000 ships. He set down his cup and called a briefing. Not an emergency session, just the regular weekly meeting moved up by 2 days. The briefing room was unremarkable. A long table, a wall-sized display, and about 20 people, military officers, defense analysts, engineers, and one representative from GADN. That representative was Sua. She had been promoted after the first engagement, partly because she was good at her job, and partly because she was the only person in the department who could explain technical data to military officers without putting them to sleep. Sung Ho stood at the front of the room and pulled up the data on the main display. The room could see the scope of the Velthari mobilization. 200,000 dots of light moving in a river of fire across the galaxy toward one tiny blue dot. Recommendations? Sung Ho asked. Sua stood and walked to the display. She pulled up the lattice's current specifications and a set of projections. If we upgrade the lattice to full wartime capacity and activate the deep-range platforms in the asteroid belt, we can handle approximately 500,000 targets simultaneously. Their fleet is 200,000, so we have more than double the capacity we need. She said it the way someone might say, "We have enough chairs for the meeting." There was a brief discussion about logistics. How long would the upgrades take? About 6 weeks. Would the asteroid belt platforms need maintenance first? Some of them. Mireille had already submitted a work order. Were there any unknowns about the Velthari that might change the math? Not really. Their technology was powerful but predictable. They used the same tactics every time. The discussion lasted 20 minutes. Then the room moved on to the next item on the agenda, a budget disagreement about a new research station on Titan. That discussion lasted 45 minutes and got significantly more heated than anything related to the alien invasion. While the military made its plans, a diplomat named Unbi was given a different kind of assignment. Unbi was 45 years old and had spent her entire career in diplomacy. She had negotiated trade agreements, resolved border disputes, and once spent 11 months mediating between two mining corporations that could not agree on who owned a particular asteroid. She was patient in the way that water is patient. She would find a way through anything if given enough time. The UESC asked her to open a communication channel with the Velthari. Not to surrender, not to threaten, simply to talk. She recorded her message in a quiet studio, sitting in a simple chair, looking directly at the camera. She wore no uniform. She carried no weapon. She spoke clearly and calmly. This message is for the commanders of the Velthari fleet. My name is Unbi. I represent the people of Earth. We have no desire for war. We did not seek this conflict, and we take no pleasure in the lives that have been lost. We are open to a ceasefire and to the possibility of peaceful communication between our peoples. If you are willing to talk, we are willing to listen. The message was transmitted on the same frequency the Velthari used for their own communications. It reached Commander Ulyss aboard the Eternal Fang, which was still parked beyond Mars, undergoing repairs. Ulyss listened to the message 3 times. She studied the human woman on the screen, her calm face, her steady voice, her complete lack of fear. This was not the face of a species that was losing. This was not even the face of a species that was worried. Ulyss had spent the weeks since the battle reviewing every piece of data from the engagement. She had watched the recordings of the lattice tearing her fleet apart. She had studied the platform movements, the firing patterns, the repair sequences. She had run simulations of the next battle with 200,000 ships. The simulations were not encouraging. She opened a private channel, not through official Velthari command, but directly to the frequency Unbi had used. She sent a single question. How long have you had these weapons? Unbi's reply came 6 hours later. We built the lattice 60 years ago. It was designed for asteroids. Ulyss sat with that answer for a very long time. 60 years. These weapons, these terrible, beautiful, impossibly efficient weapons, were 60 years old. They were not new. They were not a response to the Velthari invasion. They had been sitting there, quietly orbiting, for 6 decades, and they had been built to stop rocks. She thought about what humanity might build if it actually tried to prepare for a war. That night, Ulyss walked to the observation deck of her flagship and looked out at the stars. Somewhere behind her, 200,000 Velthari ships were coming. The largest fleet in the history of the galaxy, the pride of a 12,000-year-old empire. And for the first time in her long career, Commander Ulyss was not sure it would be enough. Back on Earth, Unbi filed a brief report on the exchange. She noted that Commander Ulyss appeared to be rational, curious, and possibly open to dialogue. She recommended continued communication. General Sung-ho read the report, nodded, and wrote a single note in the margin. Good. Keep talking. We'd rather make a friend than a graveyard. Then he finished his tea and went home. The Grand Armada of the Velthari Dominion dropped out of hyperspace beyond Neptune on a Sunday morning, Earth time. 200,000 warships appeared in the darkness all at once, like a curtain of black iron falling across the sky. They stretched across millions of kilometers in perfect formation, row after row after row of warships, carriers, destroyers, dreadnoughts, and at the very center, the personal flagship of Supreme Overlord Draven Tal, a ship so large it had its own gravity. It was the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen in one place. 12,000 years of conquest, of engineering, of war, all of it focused on one small planet, orbiting one ordinary star. Draven Tal stood on the command deck of his flagship and looked at the distant blue dot that was Earth. He had left his throne, his homeworld, his empire, all to be here, to watch this world burn with his own golden eyes. Begin the advance, he ordered. 200,000 ships moved forward. On Earth, the sensors picked them up instantly. The data flooded into Gadden headquarters, UESC command centers, and a dozen other monitoring stations across the solar system. The numbers were staggering. Every screen lit up with contacts, more than anyone had ever seen in a single engagement. Hajun looked at his screen and blinked. He had been doing this long enough that alien fleets no longer surprised him, but 200,000 was a big number, even by his relaxed standards. He glanced at Sua, who was already pulling up the lattice's status display. "Should I upgrade this to Tier 1? He asked. Sua shook her head, without looking up. "Let's wait and see if they actually do anything." In Mars orbit, Admiral Tejo set down his chess tablet and walked to the command display. He studied the formation for a moment. It was impressive, beautiful even, in a military sense. 200,000 ships, perfectly arranged, perfectly coordinated. "They brought everyone," he said quietly. In the deep command center beneath Sejong City, General Sungho stood before the main display with his hands behind his back. He sipped his tea and watched the wall of red dots advancing across the solar system map. Behind him, officers and analysts worked at their stations with the steady calm of people who had prepared for this for months. "Status of all defense systems?" he asked. An officer responded. "The lattice is at full wartime deployment. 120,000 platforms active and online. Asteroid belt kinetic batteries are charged and ready. Lunar directed energy arrays are operational. Mars orbital stations are on standby." Sungho nodded. Then he asked about the last piece. "And Gumgong?" "Online and fully integrated, sir. Project Gumgong was humanity's newest creation. Named after an ancient Korean word for diamond, it was a network of artificial intelligence command nodes hidden deep in Earth's oceans, shielded, cooled by the water above them, and connected to every single defense platform in the solar system through quantum encrypted channels. Gumgong did not replace human command. It supported it. It could process data from 120,000 platforms simultaneously, coordinate their movements, predict enemy tactics, and adjust strategies in real time. It turned the lattice from a collection of individual weapons into a single, unified mind with 120,000 hands. It had been activated 3 weeks ago, during a routine Tuesday meeting. Nobody outside the military even knew it existed. Sungho set down his tea. "Let them come." The Velthari Grand Armada advanced past Neptune, then Uranus, then Saturn. Commander Ulyss, aboard the repaired Eternal Fang, flew at the front of the formation. She had argued against this attack. She had shown Draven Tal the data, the simulations, the projections. She had told him what the humans had done to her fleet with a defense system built for asteroids. She had begged him to consider diplomacy. He had refused. He had called her a coward. He had ordered her to lead the vanguard as punishment for her failure in the first battle. She was flying at the front because she was expected to die there. She accepted this. She was a soldier. But she kept her private channel to Unbi open, just in case. The Grand Armada crossed the orbit of Jupiter, then Mars. They entered the inner solar system. And then the sky turned white. The lattice activated, all 120,000 platforms, simultaneously. The asteroid belt batteries opened fire at the same moment. The lunar arrays powered up and sent beams of focused energy lancing across millions of kilometers. And behind it all, Gumgong coordinated everything with the cold, perfect logic of a mind that did not know fear or doubt or hesitation. The first volley of kinetic impactors hit the leading edge of the Velthari fleet like a wall of invisible hammers. Ships that had survived 1,000 battles across 1,000 worlds were torn apart in seconds. The rods moved so fast that the Velthari point defense systems could not even track them, let alone stop them. Each impact was a small sun, a flash of light and heat that left nothing but expanding gas and tumbling wreckage. The directed energy beams followed, sweeping through the formation like invisible blades. They cut through ships with terrible precision, slicing carriers in half, punching holes through dreadnoughts, detonating ammunition stores deep inside warships that had been built to withstand anything. And the lattice moved. That was the part that broke the Velthari. The platforms were not stationary. They swarmed, they danced, they flowed around return fire like water flowing around stones. When the Velthari destroyed one platform, 3 others shifted to cover the gap. When a section of the lattice was weakened, Dungang redirected platforms from quiet sectors to reinforce it. The entire system breathed and flexed like a living thing. The Velthari fought back. They fought hard. Their weapons destroyed thousands of platforms. Their pilots performed maneuvers that would have been legendary in any other war. Their soldiers died bravely, screaming war cries that had echoed across the galaxy for millennia. It did not matter. The battle lasted 3 hours and 12 minutes. In those 3 hours, 140,000 Velthari ships were destroyed. They died in the cold silence of space, broken by weapons that had been built by a species they had called primitive. The wreckage field stretched across the inner solar system like a second asteroid belt, a graveyard of metal and ambition. Supreme Overlord Draven Tau stood on the command deck of his flagship and watched his empire die on the tactical display. The golden light faded from his eyes. His living armor, which had always rippled with strength and confidence, went still. He had never imagined this moment. In 12,000 years of Velthari history, no overlord had ever witnessed such a defeat. For the first time in his life, he gave the order, retreat. The surviving 60,000 ships turned and fled into hyperspace, scattering in every direction, like seeds blown from a dying flower. They left behind the wreckage of 140,000 ships, the bodies of millions of soldiers, and the shattered myth of Velthari invincibility. It was over. Commander Ulyss survived. Her ship was damaged but functional. She had spent the battle doing the only thing she could, keeping her crew alive while the sky burned around her. When the retreat order came, she did not follow the others. Instead, she stopped her ship, powered down her weapons, and opened a channel. This is Commander Ulyss of the Velthari Dominion, calling the people of Earth. Her voice was the same as it had been in every previous message, calm, warm, and steady. "I'm here, Commander." Ulyss was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been building inside her since the very first battle. "What are you?" There was a pause. When Yunbi replied, there was a softness in her voice that Ulyss had not expected. "We're human. We're just people. We build things, we protect our home, and we would still rather talk than fight, if you're willing." Ulyss closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt something that was not duty, not obedience, not the cold pride of a soldier. It was something warmer, something that felt like the beginning of understanding. "I am willing," she said. On Earth, the battle was covered on the news for about 3 days. Documentaries were announced, universities scheduled lectures. Historians began writing papers about the first interstellar conflict in human history. A popular comedian did a segment about it on a late-night show. 12,000 years of galactic domination, he said, grinning at the camera, and they lost to a bunch of robots we built to swat rocks. That's like getting beaten up by someone's kitchen appliances. The audience laughed. The segment got 40 million views. Ha-Jun finally upgraded the notification file to Tier 1. It was the first Tier 1 event in GADN history. Sua looked at the updated file and shook her head. "You know the amount of paperwork a Tier 1 generates?" she said. "I know," Ha-Jun replied, rubbing his face. "I'm going to need more coffee." Dong-Hyun, in his control room beneath Sejong City, submitted his post-engagement maintenance report. The subject line read, "Minor scoring on platform 7204 through 7312. Recommend routine polish. Overall system integrity, 97.2%. He watered General. The cactus looked exactly the same as always. Ji-Won, the retired marine biologist, finally got his sample. a small piece of Valthari hull material recovered from the wreckage field and delivered to his lab in a sealed container. He held it up to the light and smiled like a child on his birthday. "Beautiful," he whispered. Admiral Tejo returned to his chess game. He had been working on a particularly difficult puzzle for weeks. He moved a knight and smiled. Mireille published a technical paper on the lattice's performance during the engagement. It was titled, Automated Multi-Platform Defense Systems, Performance Analysis at Scale. It received 12 citations in its first month. She was very proud of it. And far away, on the damaged bridge of the Eternal Fang, Commander Euless began the long journey home. She carried with her something that no Veltari commander had ever brought back from a conquest. Not victory, not plunder, not slaves. She carried a lesson. The galaxy was bigger than the Dominion had ever imagined, and somewhere at its quiet corner, on a small blue world orbiting an ordinary star, there lived a species that built weapons to stop asteroids, made jokes during invasions, filed their apocalypses under Tier 3, and watered their cacti while the sky burned. And they were willing to talk. Life went on.